A former mayor of Salt Lake City in the United States is taking on former President George W. Bush, his Vice President Dick Cheney and the National Security Agency. Rocky Anderson's lawsuit claims visitors and athletes at the 2002 Winter Olympics in the city were spied on and that the NSA intercepted their messages, emails and also phone calls. Well, we can talk to Rocky right now. He does join us live on RT. Thanks very much for coming onto the programme this evening. Look, these are very big allegations, aren't they? What proof do you have?
Well, the story broke in the Wall Street Journal 2 years ago, and I've been seeking legal representation. I was mayor of Salt Lake City at the time, and I felt that there are a lot of civil rights organizations that should take this on. And the time kept elapsing. The statute of limitations was about to run, or may have been about to run. And since then, I've reactivated my bar license, and I decided if nobody else is going to do it, I have to do it, because we cannot stand by and watch this kind of law breaking, this massive criminality and incursions on our rights to privacy. And additional information I have has been from a high-ranking person from the NSA. He worked at the NSA during the Olympics, and he's confirmed everything, that the government basically, for the first time ever, the FBI and the NSA put a surveillance cone over Salt Lake City, an entire geographic area, never had a warrant, never had particularized suspicion that anything was going on, and they scooped up everything. They got the contents of every text message, of every email, they got the metadata of every telephone call, and on targeted telephone numbers, they actually recorded the telephone conversations.
Sure, Rocky, considering who you're up against, do you really rate your chances of winning this, or is this just an attempt to draw publicity to something that you really disagree with?
This is what our Constitution and our courts and laws passed by Congress are all about. Of course, I think that we will prevail in this lawsuit, because the rule of law is at the center of our constitutional system in this country. If we just accept that these powerful people can keep getting away with illegal and unconstitutional acts like this, then we don't have a constitutional republic anymore, and our Constitution is nothing but a piece of parchment.
I'm sure many people agree with you, but also many people would say, look, when this happened and the Olympics were taking place, it was only 6 months after 9/11, wasn't it? And surely this sort of enhanced surveillance would have been justified because of that.
Well, if it was justified, then Congress needed to act, because Congress, had laws put in place after the Cold War in 1978, and there had been the disclosure of all these kinds of abuses by our intelligence community at that time, and they passed a law that said it is a federal felony to engage in this kind of surveillance without first getting a warrant. And so it's not up to the executive branch. It wasn't up to George Bush to act as if Richard Nixon did. And Nixon's whole idea was that if the president does it, that means it's not illegal. Well, that is the very definition of a tyrant. That's a dictatorship. And George Bush didn't get to call the shots, neither did the FBI or the NSA. If there was a reason to engage in something that was going to be legal under the or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, then Congress should have acted. And they didn't do it. So the executive branch doesn't just get to make up the laws and do whatever they want as they go along. They have to obey the laws in this country and obey our Constitution. And our Constitution requires a warrant and a particularized showing of suspicion before they can ever engage in this kind of surveillance of Americans' communications.
Sure, you make your case very clearly here, but do you expect to, or are you bracing yourself for any sort of outside pressure to try and persuade you not to pursue this?
Oh, of course, there are going to be those who say, oh, look, this was just after 9/11, as you mentioned, and this was their national security issues. You know, during the Cold War, our nations were facing mutual nuclear annihilation. And our intelligence community used that as an excuse to engage in all sorts of abuses under our Constitution. And our Congress said that's not who we are as a nation. They held hearings. They brought all this to light, as one would expect in a democracy. And then they passed laws to make sure that this sort of thing wouldn't happen again. Those very laws that were passed to prevent these kinds of abuses were cast aside by the Bush administration with the attitude of, well, I'm president and whatever I say goes, regardless of what Congress says and regardless of what our Constitution says. That kind of tyranny cannot be allowed. And for those who make up excuses, who shrug their shoulders and say, oh, we need to give them a break because it was right after 9/11, those are the people that accommodate these kinds of abuses, and they're the ones that are helping pave the way toward not only a more imperial president, and that is one who doesn't have to obey the laws, but truly undermining the rule of law in this country and certainly undermining our individual rights of privacy.
Rocky, good to talk to you. It's a fascinating case. I'm sure many people will be following it too. That was Rocky Anderson, former mayor of Salt Lake City. Thank you.